Thanks, Caesar. Thank you. So, hello, everybody. Nice to be with you. Good afternoon or good morning around the world. I'm very honoured to be part of this group. I admire the work of Pax Christi International and have been loosely associated for 35 years or so since I was a young student myself. So I'm delighted to be back in touch. Caesar and I are parishioners together here in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and it was through his invitation that I'm here, and I'm pleased to be so. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the other speakers, Jan and Andy. I myself am not by trade an ethics specialist or a specialist of Catholic social teaching, so I bring to Fratelli Tutti, I guess, a more general theological and pastoral interest as a Catholic, as a parishioner and priest in a parish, as well as working in the theology area. So I'm very pleased to be with you today. And Caesar's invitation was to give sort of some general thoughts or overview of the themes of Fratelli Tutti. So I'm going to try to do that by giving some general rather than more specific thoughts at the moment. Many of us, I know, will have looked at the document, so I don't want to repeat there. So let me just pick up here. Can you see my screen? Caesar, yeah. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Okay, thanks. Great. So maybe I thought it might be useful just to think of Fratelli Tutti in line with the Pope's, if you like, published magisterium as we have it today. Since he's come to office, there's a number of documents that we really do need to read together, I think, in a sense, to get a feel for what his big ideas are and how they fit together. So remember back 2013, Laudate Si, the encyclical on the care of the earth, the care of our common home. And in the same year, his programmatic statement, Evangelii Gaudium, on the proclamation, the mission of the church in a very new culture. It was really these documents where he started talking about that we live not so much in an era of change, but in a change of era, and particularly in terms of the church's mission, that in a way the coming apart of that Western Christendom model of church into a more pluralistic, multicultural, including secular and non-religious voices all around the world. And so how does the church reshape its mission in face of this? Then in years to come, his document on family life and love in the family, Amoris Laetitia, a document on the universal call to holiness, Gaudete and Exsultate, also in there a document on young people and discernment, and these very much were spiritual reflections that he brought into a very broad audience, picking up, really emphasising that we live as people in relationships. And all these three documents really focus on how we live out our relationships, our belonging to each other in the world. It's a key theme of his. A significant document behind Fratelli Tutti is the document he co-signed in Abu Dhabi in 2019 with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar on his visit to Abu Dhabi there, a document on human fraternity for world peace and living together. And this co-signed document is very much behind Fratelli Tutti and in its thinking. We had then last year the Apostolic Exhortation after the Synod of Bishops on the Amazon area, again linking together the issues of environmental care and spirituality and the care for the local communities there. And then also at the end of last year, Fratelli Tutti, his new encyclical. So, I mean, there is a certain hierarchy in church documents, as you know. An encyclical is the most serious, the most significant document that a Pope can issue. And I think we can see here very much where he lines up his encyclicals on Laudato Si and then Fratelli Tutti. He treats both of them, I think, as his most serious statements, and sees them very much as him exercising his vocation in the footsteps of Francis of Assisi, the great prophet of creation and of social harmony, social friendship. So he sees himself very much linked into these two encyclicals. And of course, he's also published a number of interviews through his life. As any pope, every word he speaks is written down. This pope's exposed himself more than any other because he was televising his daily mass. So even his short reflections and homilies at the daily mass of a morning from the Santa Marta College were being broadcast around the world. So he's exposed himself very much to every waking thought being printed and known around. And we really do have to take any pope's total work together, the homilies, the letters, the occasional speeches, as well as the formal documents. And many of you may have come across this recent collection of reflections where he, with a type of reporter, Austin Everay, worked together, an interviewer, put together a set of reflections, particularly on the opportunity that opens up as a result of the global pandemic. I think it's fair to say that that Francis's pontificate, in a sense, will be looked at as a response to two crises: the global financial crisis of 2007, where he was still Archbishop in Latin America, and very much that crisis shaped up his response as the leader of a local church in Latin America in the time of global financial crisis. And then I think the health crisis of 2000, I think looking back, we'll see those two global moments of reckoning, in a way, which for Francis, out of his spirituality, creates moments of discernment. The crisis creates the call to reflect, to discern, to turn more deeply to the gospel and how to live out the gospel. And that's, so he's called about, let us dream. Let's think, what have we learned? What's been revealed to us through these crises, the financial crisis and the economic and the health crisis, and how do we respond? How do we become more human and more human in relationship with God as a result of these crises? So I think through his whole magisterium, we can talk about a number of key themes that emerge for Francis. He's very conscious of a set of threats to the human family, to its environment, to our habitat, and to the common good of all. And he names issues such as the forced migrations of people, the degradation of human life and human dignity, the exploitation of people so much, the unregulated capitalist market, and the drive for endless growth and profit that only operates on the production of a culture of waste and indifference to people, that people become consumed in the system driving for profit. The environmental crisis is very much on his mind, but he sees it not only as in a sense, as a crisis of the natural world, but that's a crisis of the human world too. Human communities, human families, human workers, human women and children are all in one way parts of the environmental crisis that's going on around us. And then too, in more recent times, perhaps very attention to the social polarization, the rise of certain popularisms around the world that are reactive and resistive in many ways to the sort of open society, to the society of encounter that he would point to, and the political radicalization that comes up to that. And then he sees the response then, the Christian then called to respond, motivated by the gospel, but also by our sense of a common humanity and our common creation by the Creator. The need to respond. A key theme of his from Laudate Si through is that of the integrated ecology of life, that every aspect of life, the physical, the spiritual, the intellectual, the political, the social, every aspect of life is bound together and bound together. And where one part of that ecology, that web, is interfered with or broken, the other parts suffer too. And so he starts to call for this integrated ecology of life that takes into account life in all its forms. And that's very open to the spiritual dimension of life in all its forms. We can really feel his Jesuit formation in this area, that the spiritual is to be found in every aspect of life, from the smallest atoms right through to the great projects of history, that every part of life has its spiritual dimension and calls us by that spiritual dimension into relationship with each other, with the whole of life, with God, the creator of all things. And the way into that sort of spiritual renewal is through the practice of human encounter, dialogue, and enrichment through others. this is a common theme that runs through him. In Francis's mind, nobody stands alone, or if we do stand alone, it's only to enter more deeply into our own spiritual awareness to realise just how embedded we are into natural and cultural systems and groupings that link us together. And we become more and more human, not by standing away from, or he keeps using the word indifferent to what's going on around us, but by entering more openly, more freely, more completely, including with the moments of self-sacrifice and perseverance that takes to enter into those relationships. Globally, this calls, in a sense, for a new type of politics and a new type of economics that begins from the concrete, from the periphery, from the ground, and opens out to include all. So he sees here very much rather than a top-down model, or the Western bureaucracy's idea of central bureaucracy that spreads out and centrally plans the whole of its state. He very much sees that there's a much more complex political reality going on that begins by attending to the concrete, to the ground, and builds together to include then all within the group. And this then creates to what perhaps is his most important idea, in a sense, that his promotion of a non-apocalyptic view of history and politics. That the history and politics is the field of human freedom and human hard work, and through patience and encounter and dialogue and the hard work of walking with each other, we can avoid those dualistic either-or clashes that see, if you like, a clash of civilizations, or a clash between good and evil, or a clash between Christendom and the secular modernity on the other hand. So avoiding these dualistic views of reality, where it's one or the other. He says we need to look further, deeper into reality to see the unity, the togetherness that can even exist within these often quite different, diverse forms of life, and to take the steam out of those apocalyptic narratives that push towards aggression, conflict, competition, war, the survival of the fittest. He sees very much the work of the church to, if I take the steam out of those generative narratives. If any of you have read any of René Girard, you'll be very familiar with that language. And this all comes together towards what he would see to be a new sort of humanism. And this is harking back before Vatican II to the work of Father de Lubac, a new sort of humanism that is gospel inspired but open to all, and comes about through this fraternity and social friendship. So Fratelli Tutti, this is his call, a new sort of fraternity between all women and men, where we are fellow travellers of the same flesh, children of the same earth, which is our common home. And that's very much harking back, if you remember a couple of years earlier, that Abu Dhabi document where he and the Imam talk out of a believer's position in the two traditions of Islam and Christianity, that our faith leads believers to see in the other a brother or sister to be supported and loved. Through faith in God, who has created the universe, creatures and all human beings are called to express this human fraternity by safeguarding creation and the entire universe. So can you see here how he links together the care of creation and the building of human social community? These two things are wed together. Thanks, Cesar. I'll bring this together now. So then I think we can see where do these ideas come from. I think for him, we see a whole long tradition of thinking about social friendship that reaches back to Aristotle, to Aristotle's teaching on friendship as a social, a political, a cultural force, of course, to the gospel, to Jesus. I think in this idea of fraternity, we see the Pope saying, look at the French Revolution, look at the foundation of Western modern society is in that program originating out of the French Revolution, out of Western Enlightenment, promoting liberty, equality, and fraternity. And I think the Pope's suggesting that yes, we need to promote liberty, we need to promote equality, but without fraternity, without social friendship, without human community, the other two can turn into monsters and can become oppressive to us. So we need the balance, he says. I think he's saying that Western culture hasn't yet realised its own vision. It hasn't yet realised its own complete picture. And so then we have in the document itself a number of chapters. Many of you will have read these, so I won't go through them. It's a type of see, judge, act methodology where he names a number of concerns or challenges, threats to human sociality that he sees, that he reflects in the light of Scripture, the Good Samaritan parable, and in the light of Catholic social teaching about those. And then he provides some suggestions about how we move forward on those key issues. And these would be close to the heart of Pax Christi, chapter 4 on migration, chapter 5 on human dignity and a new type of politics that is based in solidarity. Chapter 6 on dialogue and friendship, and chapter 7 particularly on peace, a reflection on the just war and the death penalty, where he really embeds now into magisterial teaching in the Catholic social tradition the moving away from the just war theory and the death penalty as options, harking back really to Benedict XV during World War I, who called the war a useless struggle. That while we might be able to think theoretically about conditions for a just war, the increase of technology and biological and chemical warfare means that there is no instance at the moment where you could name the conditions for a just war to exist. So while it might exist in theory, it doesn't happen on the ground. And likewise for the death penalty, while the right to a state to protect itself against notorious criminals might exist, the means of detention these days are so sophisticated that there would not be likely to exist in reality an example where the death penalty could be applied. So just to wrap that up. So thank you. That's to give a quick summary, maybe some ideas, a bit of the background, and then to focus in on some of the key themes of his chapters. Thanks.